Hi, and welcome to a new episode of the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and today I want to start with a simple but powerful question. Have you ever listened to someone speak English, understood almost everything, but when it was your turn to respond, your mind just froze? Maybe you knew the words, maybe you've studied for years, but something still blocked the natural flow. If that sounds like you, I want you to know, you are not alone. This is more common than you think, and the solution might be simpler than you expect. Today, I'm going to help you unlock that part of your brain that already understands English, but isn't yet confident in using it freely. We're going to talk about how to train your brain to think in English while you listen. And yes, that is completely possible, even if you're not fluent yet. So, before we dive into the techniques, let me just say this. I'm glad you're here. Whether this is your first episode or you've been following us for a while, this space is for learners like you, people who are doing their best, showing up, and looking for practical ways to improve. Not perfect ways, practical ones. You don't need a perfect accent. You don't need to memorize 1,000 rules. You just need a clear mindset, some useful habits, and a little consistency. If that's what you're looking for, you're in the right place. Now let's go back to that feeling I mentioned. When you listen, understand the words but can't respond. That's not because you're bad at English. It's not because your brain is slow, it's because you're still translating. You hear a sentence, then you quickly try to understand it in your native language, and then you try to build a response in English. And while your brain is doing all that, the conversation moves on. It's frustrating, but guess what? That process can be changed. You can stop translating and start thinking in English. And one of the best ways to start is by changing how you listen. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a movie in English, and for a moment, you forgot you were watching it in another language? You were so focused on the scene, the emotion, the story, that your brain just got it without working so hard. That's the feeling I want you to have more often. That's what I mean by thinking in English while you listen. It's not about catching every single word. It's not about grammar. It's about connection, intuition, and trust in your brain's ability to understand. Maybe you've tried listening to podcasts or watching series, but it still feels difficult. You pause, rewind, check the subtitles. You feel like you're not improving. I get it. That used to be me with Spanish. I thought I needed more vocabulary or a better textbook. But the moment I changed my approach to listening, everything started to shift. I stopped chasing every word and started focusing on meaning. I started listening like I was part of the conversation, not like I was doing a test. That's the mindset I want to help you develop. So here's what today is really about: helping you move from passive listening to active thinking. I'll share stories of real people who made this shift and practical steps you can use right after this episode. You don't need to wait months to feel progress. You can start today. But before we go any further, I want to invite you to take a second and support this podcast. If you're enjoying this kind of content and it's helping you feel less alone in your learning journey, please follow us, leave a like, or share it with someone who's also learning English. It's a small action that helps us reach more learners around the world who might be feeling stuck just like you were. I want to create a space here where English learning feels friendly, possible, and even fun, where we're not afraid to make mistakes, where we celebrate progress, even the small ones. And I want to remind you that listening is not a passive skill. It's a mental exercise. You're not just hearing sounds. You're building a map in your brain. You're creating meaning. And the more you practice thinking in English while you listen, the easier everything else becomes. Speaking, understanding, responding. It all starts to connect. So take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. You don't need to be perfect. You're here to grow, and you're doing exactly that just by listening right now. Maybe you're walking, driving, cooking, or just taking a break. Whatever you're doing, I want you to know that this time, you're spending on your English matters. You're not just listening to a podcast. You're building the foundation of real fluency. And that starts with how you think when you listen. Have you ever heard someone say, "You need to think in English"? Maybe you nodded but didn't really know what that meant. How do you think in another language? Does it just happen? Is there a secret? The truth is, it doesn't happen all at once. It's a process. And that process begins not when you speak, but when you Listen. Listening is the first moment where English enters your mind. So if you want to think in English, you need to change how that moment feels. You need to stop translating and start connecting directly with meaning. That's why this episode is so important. It's not just about improving your listening skills, it's about changing your experience with English. Imagine what would happen if listening became enjoyable. If you could watch a movie or join a Zoom call and actually follow the conversation without feeling lost. Imagine the confidence you'd feel. The freedom. That's what I want for you. And that's what we're building together, one episode at a time. So thank you for choosing to spend this moment with me. Thank you for showing up, even if your English isn't where you want it to be yet. You're here. You're learning. And I promise, what you'll hear in this episode can make a real difference if you apply it. Let's do this together. Let's take listening, something you do every day, and turn it into a tool that transforms the way you think in English. When we talk about listening comprehension, most learners imagine it's just about hearing English words, understanding their meanings, and putting everything together as quickly as possible. That seems logical. You hear a sentence and your brain works hard to recognize the words, translate them into your native language, and then reconstruct the meaning. But this isn't real listening. At least not the kind that leads to fluency. Real listening in English is not just about hearing and decoding. It's about catching meaning as it flows, about seeing patterns, feeling the rhythm of the language, and letting go of the need to stop and translate. I meet so many learners who believe they're not good at English listening simply because they don't catch every word. They say, I watch a movie and I get lost. Or, I listen to podcasts, but I have to pause and check the dictionary all the time. If that's your experience, I want to tell you something important. This struggle is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're using the wrong strategy. You're not broken. Your brain is working fine. You've just been trained to focus on the wrong thing, on translating instead of understanding ideas. Let me share a story with you. Sarah is a graphic designer from Rome. She started learning English in school, like many people do, with lots of grammar, vocabulary lists, and exercises. When she moved into the professional world, she needed to understand English in meetings, emails, and international design projects. So she did what she had always done. She tried to be perfect. Every time someone spoke English to her, she paused mentally and translated every word. Her eyes would focus, her brain would tense, and her shoulders would rise slightly. She was trying to keep up, word by word. The result? She was always behind in conversations. By the time she figured out what someone had said, they were already 2 or 3 sentences ahead. In group meetings, she avoided speaking because she was afraid of missing something. She told me once, I felt like my brain was in a race it could never win. She was constantly translating, analyzing, and falling behind, and the worst part was that she thought this was normal, that maybe she just wasn't good at languages. But then, something changed. One evening, she was watching a documentary in English about photography. She had subtitles on, like, always. But halfway through the episode, she realized she wasn't reading the subtitles anymore. She was just watching, just listening. She couldn't explain why, but the words felt clearer. The phrases made sense. She was no longer trying to grab each word. She was following the idea of what was being said. It wasn't about understanding everything. It was about understanding enough to stay connected to the story. That moment was a turning point. She realized that real comprehension doesn't happen through translation. It happens through trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your brain. She began practicing this new way of listening. No more pausing every 5 seconds. No more checking the dictionary. She would listen to podcasts during her morning walk, even if she didn't understand every part. Instead of focusing on what she didn't know, she started noticing what she could understand. And little by little, her confidence grew. We talked about it later, and she said something I'll never forget. When I stopped needing to understand everything, I started understanding more. That's exactly it. Comprehension isn't about control. It's about presence. You need to be present with the speaker. You need to stay with the message, even if some words are missing. The goal is not perfect understanding. It's connection. Sarah's experience isn't unique. I've heard this same transformation in learners from different places. People from Paris, Athens, Oslo, Dublin. The same pattern shows up. again and again. As long as you're trying to translate every word, you're stuck in delay mode. You're reacting, not listening. But when you shift your focus to the message, when you allow yourself to miss details but stay present with the speaker, something opens up. You begin to think in English. You start to follow the rhythm and flow instead of fighting it. This shift isn't always comfortable at first. It might feel like you're losing control. You might feel frustrated when you don't catch a word. But that's part of the process. Listening in English is a mental habit. And like any habit, it takes time to rewire. Sarah gave herself permission to stay in the moment, even when it felt messy. And that's what changed everything. I want you to think about your own listening habits. Do you pause and replay constantly? Do you feel anxious if you miss a word? Do you grab your phone to look up phrases as you listen? These behaviors might feel helpful, but they're often signs that you're still translating. And translating is the very thing slowing you down. It's like trying to run while carrying a heavy bag. At some point, you have to drop the bag if you want to move freely. Here's something simple you can try. The next time you listen to something in English, a podcast, a video, even a voicemail, don't aim for 100% comprehension. Instead, aim to follow the idea. Pay attention to the tone, the speaker's emotion, the context. What are they trying to say? What's the big picture? Let your brain relax and listen like a native speaker does. Not for perfection, but for meaning. That's what real listening is. And once you start practicing this way, you'll notice a shift. You'll stop chasing words, and you'll start moving with the language. Just like Sarah, who once felt slow and nervous, and now listens with confidence and calm. This is what happens when we stop focusing on every little piece and start seeing the bigger pattern. You stop translating, and you start thinking in English. One of the biggest shifts you can make as an English learner is moving from translating to truly thinking in English. Most people don't realize how much translation slows them down. It creates a barrier between what you hear and how you understand it. You might not even notice it at first, because translation feels like the natural thing to do. You hear a sentence, your brain translates it into your native language, then you try to understand the message and respond. But here's the problem. That process is heavy. It adds an extra step between listening and understanding, and it keeps you from becoming fluent. If you want to listen better, you have to change how your brain handles the language. You need to connect English directly to meaning. No middle language, no translation step in between. I've seen this with so many learners, but one example always comes to mind. Pierre, a software engineer from Lyon, used to tell me how nervous he felt in English meetings. His team worked across several countries, and every Monday morning they had a video call in English. During those meetings, Pierre's main goal was not to contribute ideas or understand the strategy. His focus was survival. He would open a notebook and write down everything people said, line by line, not just notes. He tried to write full sentences. Then, after the meeting, he would spend up to an hour translating everything into French word by word. He thought this was helping him improve. But in reality, it was keeping him stuck. Each week, Pierre ended those meetings exhausted. Even though he had the information, he couldn't respond during the call. He needed time to process, to translate, to double-check his understanding. He was afraid to speak because he worried about making mistakes. His English was good on paper, but in real time he felt frozen. And that's what happens when we rely too much on translation. It gives us information, but it steals our confidence. It creates distance between you and the language, and it turns communication into a stressful puzzle. After several months of frustration, Pierre decided to try something different. Instead of writing down full sentences and translating later, he challenged himself to listen differently. I remember the day he told me about the shift. He said, "This time I didn't write anything, I just imagined what they were saying." That was the key. Instead of translating words, he started visualizing situations. When someone said, "We're launching the update next Friday," he didn't translate that sentence into French. He pictured the update being released, imagined his team getting ready, saw the project in his mind. That small change completely transformed his experience. The difference wasn't about vocabulary. Pierre didn't learn new words overnight. What changed was how he processed English. His brain began connecting English words directly to ideas, images, and feelings. He started listening with intention, not as a translator, but as a participant in the conversation. Over time, he began to respond faster. He no longer needed to pause, think in French, and translate back to English. The sentences came more naturally, and the pressure disappeared. This change didn't happen instantly. At first, it felt strange. His hand wanted to reach for the pen. His brain wanted to go back to the old system of translating and organizing everything. But he kept practicing. He listened, pictured the message, and trusted himself. After a few weeks, he noticed something incredible. He started remembering more from the meetings. Even without writing anything down, the main ideas stayed with him. That's because his brain was finally treating English as a living language, not a subject to be translated and memorized. I tell Pierre's story because it shows exactly what needs to happen when you want to stop translating and start thinking in English. It's not just about listening more or learning new phrases. It's about changing how you experience English in real time. You have to train your brain to treat English as something familiar and direct, not as a code that needs to be broken, not as something you get right, just as something you understand and use moment by moment. You can start doing this in your own life, even in small ways. The next time you watch a video or listen to a podcast in English, try not to write things down. Don't pause to translate. Instead, close your eyes and picture what's being said. Let the words create images in your mind. Let the sentences become actions, people, situations. This builds a strong connection between English and meaning, and that's where fluency begins. Pierre still joins his weekly meetings, but now he participates without fear. He asks questions, gives updates, and shares ideas, without a notebook and without translation. He listens, he understands, and he responds. And he does it because he shifted the way his brain processes English. He stopped making English pass through a filter, and he started thinking with the language itself. That's the goal. Not perfect grammar, not remembering every word. The real goal is to hear something in English and feel like it makes sense without needing to switch languages inside your head. This change can happen for anyone. It doesn't depend on age, background, or years of study. It depends on how you listen and how you train your mind to respond. Thinking in English is not magic. It's a habit. It's built through consistent exposure, active listening, and the courage to stop translating. When you let go of that habit, you make space for real understanding, real connection, and real communication. That's what transforms your English, not just what you know, but how you use it. One of the most powerful tools you can use to improve your English listening is something you already do in your daily life, even without thinking about it: visualization. When you listen in English, don't just hear the words, picture them. Imagine the situation, the people, the actions, the mood. Turn the sounds into scenes in your mind. This is what I call visual listening. It's a way to connect what you hear directly with meaning without stopping to translate or analyze. When you picture what someone is saying, you don't just understand the words, you experience them. And that's what makes the language come alive. Let me explain what this looks like in practice. Imagine someone says, "I'm walking to the train station because I missed the bus." Now, you could try to translate that sentence into your native language and then make sense of it. But instead, try this. Close your eyes and see the person in your mind. Maybe they're walking fast, maybe it's cold outside, maybe they look a little frustrated. You picture the train station in the distance, the street they're walking on, the time of day. You don't need every word to be perfect. What you need is the image, the action, the idea. That's where comprehension becomes natural. When I was learning Spanish, I remember the moment this technique changed everything for me. I was listening to an interview with a musician talking about his childhood. At first, I was focused on the words, trying to translate them in my head. But I was missing the point, so I closed my eyes and listened again. I imagined him as a child, holding a guitar, sitting in his parents' living room, describing the songs he used to hear on the radio. Suddenly, everything clicked. I wasn't just understanding the words, I was feeling the story. That shift from hearing to seeing opened a door in my brain. It helped me stop translating and start thinking in the language. This works in English too. In fact, it works in any language because our brains are wired to learn through stories and images. Visual listening activates a deeper part of your memory. It helps you remember vocabulary better because you connect words with scenes, not just definitions. And it allows you to understand faster because you're not stopping to do mental math every time you hear a sentence. I want to give you some practical ways to try this today. First, when you're listening to something in English, try to focus on the main verbs and nouns. Verbs are the actions. They're what make the scene move. Nouns are the people and things. They're what give the scene shape. If you hear, "She's cooking dinner while listening to music," just focus on cooking, dinner, and music. You don't need every little word. Just imagine the action. Is she in a kitchen? What kind of food is she making? What music is playing? Your brain fills in the rest. And in doing that, you're learning in a way that's much more powerful than translation. Another way to use visual listening is by turning it into a habit with your favorite content. Pick a podcast, a short video, or even a song. Listen to a short part, maybe 20 or 30 seconds. Then pause, close your eyes, and ask yourself, what did I just hear? Not the words, but the scene. Can I see it in my mind? If you can picture it, you understood it. If not, don't worry. Listen again. Try to find the keywords that help you create the image. This exercise trains your brain to focus on meaning instead of individual words. This also works really well when you're watching videos or series in English. Try muting the subtitles for a few moments and just watch the body language and listen to the tone of voice. Then close your eyes and play a sentence. Again, try to see the moment in your head. Where are the people? What are they doing? What's happening between them? That kind of practice builds intuition. And intuition is what makes listening feel easy. Sometimes I do this exercise live with my students. I'll say a sentence and they'll draw or describe the scene to me. I'll say something like, "The man dropped his keys while getting out of the car." And then I ask them to picture it. Where is the car parked? What kind of expression does the man have? Is he in a hurry? That moment when they stop thinking about grammar and start creating the scene is when their listening improves instantly. They're no longer decoding. They're understanding naturally. Now, I know this might feel strange at first. If you're used to studying English in a more traditional way, you might feel like this is too simple or not academic enough. But remember, the goal isn't to pass a test, it's to feel comfortable with the language. And the way to do that is by using the same strategies your brain already uses in your first language. You don't translate when someone tells you a story in your own language. You see it, you feel it, you understand it through images and context. That's what we want to build in English too. So try to make this part of your routine. Even for 5 minutes a day. Pick something to listen to, close your eyes, and turn the words into pictures. Let your imagination guide you. You'll notice that you begin to recognize phrases more quickly. You'll stop needing to translate in your head. You'll feel more confident, more connected, and more fluent. Not because you've memorized more, but because you're finally processing English the way fluent speakers do. And one more tip. If you ever get stuck, don't panic. Just return to the core of the sentence. What is the action? Who is involved? Where is it happening? These 3 questions, what, who, and where, can help you build the picture every time. The rest is just detail. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. Visual listening is not a trick or a shortcut. It's a shift in how you experience language. Instead of working hard to catch every sound, you start trusting your brain to understand meaning through imagery. You become an active listener, not just a passive one. You engage with English in a way that is real, emotional, and memorable. And that is the kind of learning that lasts. When you're learning English, it's natural to want to understand everything. You want to catch every word, every phrase, every detail. It feels like if you miss one word, you're going to miss the whole meaning. But here's the truth I want you to remember. When you try to catch every single word, you often miss the bigger picture. You focus so hard on the small pieces that you lose the flow of the conversation. And that flow, that movement of language and meaning, is where real understanding happens. Let me tell you about someone who struggled with this exact thing. Ana is a nurse from Madrid. She has always loved languages, and when she started learning English, she was incredibly dedicated. Every morning on her way to work, she listened to English podcasts. She told me she wanted to improve her comprehension fast, so she pushed herself to focus on every sentence. But instead of feeling more confident, she started to feel overwhelmed. She would pause the audio every few seconds, rewind, and replay. If she didn't catch a word, she felt like she was doing something wrong. If she didn't understand a phrase, she would stop the episode entirely and look it up. At first, it seemed like a disciplined routine. She was paying close attention, taking notes, and reviewing every part. But after a few weeks, she noticed something strange. Even though she was spending more time listening, she wasn't improving the way she expected. Her brain felt tired after each episode. She couldn't remember the main ideas. She was so focused on each word that she missed the message. The podcast became stressful instead of helpful. She was chasing every word and losing the story. One day, she decided to try something new. She chose an episode she had already listened to 3 or 4 times, and this time she made a rule. No pausing, no rewinding, no looking up words, just listening, start to finish. She said it felt uncomfortable at first. There were still words she didn't catch, expressions she didn't fully understand. But then something amazing happened. She realized she understood the meaning of the episode. She could describe what it was about. She could remember the main points. And for the first time, she felt relaxed while listening. She wasn't chasing every word. She was flowing with the language. That shift changed everything for her. She started applying the same approach with other types of content. Instead of focusing on every single word, she focused on the feeling, the tone, the rhythm of what she was hearing. If she missed something, she kept going. If a sentence didn't make sense, she let it go and waited for the next one. And soon she noticed a huge improvement. She began understanding more, not less. She became faster at identifying meaning. And more importantly, she stopped feeling anxious while listening. This is the lesson I want to share with you. Fluency isn't about perfection. It's not about catching every word. It's about confidence and flow. When you listen to your native language, you don't hear every word perfectly. You don't pause to analyze every sentence. You listen for meaning, and your brain fills in the rest. You stay connected to the conversation. That's exactly what you need to develop in English, too. Think of listening like walking through a forest. If you stop to examine every leaf, every rock, every tree, you lose your sense of direction. You get stuck in the details. But if you keep walking, if you let the path guide you, you begin to see the shape of the forest. You feel the space around you. You understand where you are and where you're going. That's what it means to listen for flow, not for perfection. I often remind learners that our brains are excellent at filling in the gaps. If you miss a word, your brain can still make sense of the sentence. If you skip a detail, the overall message still reaches you. This isn't laziness, it's efficiency. It's how native speakers process language every day. And it's how you can train your mind to understand English with less stress and more success. One practical way to practice this is by choosing a short podcast or audio clip and setting a timer. For 5 minutes, listen without stopping. Don't pause, don't rewind, and don't judge yourself. Just let the words flow over you. Notice the rhythm, the tone, the main ideas. After it finishes, ask yourself, what was that about? What do I remember? Don't worry about the exact words. Focus on the story. This kind of practice builds your listening stamina, and it teaches your brain to stay present with the language. Another tip is to listen with a relaxed body. If you're tense, shoulders up, eyebrows tight, fingers ready to pause, you're sending your brain the message that this is a test. But if you breathe, sit comfortably, and treat the audio like a story someone's telling you, your brain becomes more open. It listens in a more natural way, just like it does in your first language. Anna told me something beautiful after making this change. She said, "Once I stopped trying to catch every word, I finally felt like I was part of the conversation." That's exactly the goal. You're not trying to be a perfect listener. You're trying to be an engaged one. You want to stay connected, present, and open to the meaning. You want the language to flow through you, not stop and start every few seconds. This is what helps you grow. This is what builds fluency. I want to encourage you to be kind to yourself when you listen. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to keep going. Let the language move. Let your brain trust itself. The more you do this, the easier it becomes to hear English, understand the message, and respond without fear. And isn't that what fluency really is? Not knowing every word, but feeling comfortable enough to keep listening, keep speaking, and keep learning, without chasing perfection. One of the biggest mindset shifts you can make as an English learner is learning to get comfortable with not understanding everything. I know how uncomfortable that might sound. Most of us are taught that in order to succeed, we have to be sure, precise, and correct. But when it comes to real conversations in English, the truth is, even native speakers don't catch every word. They don't always understand every phrase, especially in noisy places or when someone speaks quickly, uses slang, or has a different accent. What helps them keep the conversation going is not perfect comprehension, but confidence in managing uncertainty. And that's exactly what you can develop too. I want you to imagine a moment in a conversation where someone says something and you only catch half of it. Maybe you understand the beginning, but the middle part is unclear. Maybe you hear a few words you know, but the rest is too fast. Now ask yourself, what do you usually do in that moment? Do you panic? Do you mentally freeze? Do you give up on trying to understand the rest? These reactions are normal, but they don't help you grow. Instead, I want to show you that moments like these are actually a powerful opportunity to build your listening muscles. When we let go of the pressure to understand everything perfectly, we create space to focus on what really matters: tone, rhythm, keywords, and intention. These are the things that help us stay connected to the message, even when we don't hear every detail. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone says, "Hey, sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible and I couldn't find a place to park." Now, let's say you missed the middle part. You only hear, "Hey, sorry I'm late. Couldn't find a place." Even with those fragments, you probably understand what happened. Your brain fills in the missing pieces. Why? Because you picked up the tone of apology, the rhythm of casual speech, and some essential words like sorry, late, and place. That's what I mean by comfortable uncertainty. You don't need every single word to understand the meaning. You just need the main signals. You can think of them as clues that your brain uses to solve the message. And over time, the more you practice listening for these clues instead of stressing over missing pieces, the more naturally you begin to understand English in real time. One very useful technique is to shift your attention from the individual words to the speaker's tone and rhythm. Tone tells you how someone feels. Are they excited, nervous, bored, joking, upset? Rhythm tells you how they're organizing their thoughts. Are they speaking quickly because they're in a rush? Slowly because they want you to understand something important? These two elements can give you so much information, even if you don't catch every word. Another helpful tool is identifying keywords. These are the words that carry the meaning of the sentence. Usually they're nouns, verbs, and sometimes adjectives or adverbs. You don't need to hear all the articles or prepositions to know what's going on. For example, if someone says, "Yesterday I went to the museum with my friend to see the new photography exhibition," the keywords might be yesterday, went, museum, friend, and photography exhibition. If you catch those, you understand the essence. If you miss a few connecting words like to or with, it doesn't stop your comprehension. You can train yourself to listen for these keywords by choosing a short piece of audio and writing down just the key points after listening. Don't try to write everything. Just ask yourself, what were the 3 most important words in that sentence or paragraph? This helps you focus on meaning instead of form. It also teaches your brain to prioritize, which is what fluent listeners do naturally. There's something very freeing about accepting that you won't understand everything. It takes the pressure off. It allows you to be present in the moment and engage with the language as it's spoken, not as something you need to control or perfect. I've seen learners transform their listening skills just by letting go of the need to catch it all. They stop feeling tense and their ears start opening up. They become more relaxed, more curious, and more in tune with the natural flow of English. Let me tell you about a small group I worked with during an online listening workshop. One of the participants, Elena from Vienna, had a habit of writing down entire conversations word for word, trying to catch every single sentence. She told me that every time she missed something, she felt like a failure. So we did a simple exercise. I played a short clip of someone describing their weekend plans, and I asked the group not to take notes, not to pause, not to rewind. Their only task was to listen once and write down 3 words that described what the speaker was doing. At first, Elena felt nervous, like it wouldn't be enough. But after the exercise, she said she was surprised at how much she remembered. She didn't need all the details. She got the message, and that was enough. That moment taught her something important. She realized that real listening isn't about perfection. It's about staying connected to the meaning. It's about being okay with the unknown and learning to work with what you do understand. And I think that's one of the most important skills you can build as an English learner. Because in the real world, conversations are messy. People interrupt each other, speak fast, make mistakes. There's background noise, different accents, and unexpected topics. The people who thrive in these situations are not the ones who know the most vocabulary. They're the ones who stay calm, listen for the key parts, and let the rest go. You don't need to be perfect to be fluent. You just need to be flexible. If you can stay curious and relaxed in moments of uncertainty, you're already doing what fluent speakers do. And the more you practice this, the more confident you'll become. It's not about how many words you know. It's about how well you use the ones you recognize and how you let context guide your understanding. So the next time you're listening to someone speak English and you don't catch every word, I want you to take a breath and keep going. Focus on what you do hear. Notice the tone, the rhythm, the energy of the speaker. Pay attention to the main words. Let your brain make connections, even if some parts are missing. That's not failure. That's listening in a real human way. And it's one of the most valuable skills you can build on your path to fluency. One of the most underestimated skills in English listening is prediction. And I don't mean guessing randomly. I'm talking about something your brain already does all the time without you even noticing. When you're watching a movie, talking to a friend, or listening to someone speak in your native language, your brain is constantly predicting what comes next. It's using logic, context, tone, and your past experience to stay one step ahead. And that ability to predict meaning is exactly what makes listening feel natural, smooth, and effortless. The good news is, you can train your brain to do the same thing in English. When we talk about fluency, people often think about vocabulary or grammar. But the truth is, fluent listeners are not listening word by word. They're listening in chunks. They're using the beginning of a sentence to anticipate the ending. They hear a familiar phrase and immediately connect it to what usually comes next. This mental shortcut saves time, reduces confusion, and keeps the conversation flowing. You don't need to understand everything from zero. You just need to recognize the pattern and let your brain do what it already knows how to do. Let me show you how this works. I'll say a sentence starter, and you can try to finish it silently in your head. Ready? I'm going to the store because... Think about it. You probably said something like, I need to buy something, or we ran out of milk. That wasn't a random guess. You used the context of the sentence and your real-life knowledge to make a prediction. You've heard this structure before. Your brain knows what kinds of things people usually say after that phrase. Let's try another one. She didn't come to the meeting because... What did you imagine? Maybe she was sick, or she forgot, or she had another appointment. Again, your brain used logic. You weren't translating. You were thinking in English and using your understanding of how conversations work to predict the next part. That's exactly the skill we want to strengthen. This strategy becomes even more powerful when you're listening to fast speech. In real conversations, people speak quickly, use contractions, and sometimes skip words. If you rely only on hearing each word clearly, you'll often get lost. But if you're listening with a sense of prediction, if you're listening with expectation, you'll stay connected. You'll feel like the speaker is walking a path you already know, and you're just walking beside them. There are simple ways to practice this. One of my favorites is to listen to an English video or podcast and pause it after a sentence begins. Then try to guess what the speaker will say next. Don't worry about being right or wrong. The goal is to activate your brain in English, to get used to using logic and context in real time. After your guess, play the rest of the sentence and compare. Were you close? Did the meaning match what you imagined? This kind of active engagement is what turns passive listening into real comprehension. Another way to practice is to focus on common sentence patterns. In English, we use certain structures again and again. Phrases like, I think that, I don't know if, I'm not sure but maybe, or the reason is. These phrases have predictable patterns. Once you know them, you can use your prediction skills to stay ahead in the conversation. You don't have to catch every word. You just need to catch enough to recognize where the sentence is going. I remember working with a student named Luca, an architect from Milan. He had strong reading and writing skills in English, but when it came to listening, he often felt lost. He told me he needed people to speak slowly so he could catch all the words. I asked him to try a different approach. I played a short dialogue and stopped it after a few words. The train was delayed because I asked him to guess. He smiled and said, "It was raining?" I pressed play. The speaker said, "The train was delayed because of bad weather." He got it, not word for word, but the meaning. That was the breakthrough. He didn't need perfection. He needed to trust his instinct. From that day on, we worked on prediction exercises. Over time, he became much faster at following spoken English. He could stay with the speaker even when the sentences were long or the accent was unfamiliar. Why? Because his brain was no longer trying to decode everything in real time. It was using patterns and context to predict meaning. And with that skill, listening became less of a challenge and more of a rhythm he could follow. You can build this same ability, no matter what level you're at now. Start with short, simple sentences. Pause and predict. Try it with movies, series, YouTube videos, or audiobooks. As you get better, you'll notice that entire phrases begin to sound familiar. You'll recognize the tone someone uses when they're about to give an opinion or disagree politely or tell a story. You'll notice when someone is about to explain something, change the topic, or finish what they're saying. This awareness gives you control, and control gives you confidence. The more you predict, the more you'll realize how repetitive and logical spoken English can be. Yes, people use different words and expressions, but the structure is often predictable. Once you start listening with that in mind, the fear of missing a word starts to disappear. You'll stop freezing when you don't understand something. Instead, you'll keep going, using your prediction skills to fill in the gaps. That's how fluent listeners operate. They're not perfect, they're flexible, and they rely on their sense of logic and pattern recognition to stay engaged. One thing I always remind my students is that listening is not a test. It's a conversation. You're not being graded, you're connecting with another person, and in that connection, there's room for imperfection, for guessing, for trying again. The more you relax and trust the process, the more you'll enjoy it. And prediction is part of that trust. It's saying, I may not know the exact words, but I understand the idea. I know where this is going. And that's a powerful feeling. So next time you listen to someone speak in English, try to feel the rhythm. Pay attention to the beginning of the sentence. Ask yourself, what's likely to come next? Don't translate, don't freeze. Just follow the story, follow the logic, and let your brain do what it's designed to do. You'll be surprised how quickly prediction becomes a natural part of your listening, and how much easier it becomes to understand spoken English in real time. One of the biggest lessons I've learned through teaching English is that progress doesn't come from doing a lot in one day. It comes from doing a little every day. When you're trying to improve your listening skills, the most powerful thing you can do is stay consistent. Not perfect, not intense, just consistent. Listening to English for 5 or 10 minutes each day can have a greater impact than listening for an hour once a week and then stopping. I've seen this work over and over, and one story that always stays with me is Jonas's. Jonas is a photographer from Berlin, and he came to me after trying many different methods to improve his English. He had studied the language in school, taken advanced grammar classes, and even joined a few conversation groups. But when it came to real-life listening, he still felt stuck. He told me that he understood the words, but his brain wasn't keeping up when native speakers talked. He said it felt like trying to catch a train that was already moving too fast. Every time he started to focus, the sentence was already over. At first, Jonas believed he needed more vocabulary. Then he thought maybe his grammar wasn't strong enough. But the truth was simpler than that. His listening muscles just weren't being trained consistently. He was jumping from one voice to another, from one video to another, and his brain never had time to adjust. I suggested something very different. Choose one English podcast. Just one. Listen to it every day. Not to finish as many episodes as possible, but to build a habit, to get comfortable with one voice, and to stay in the rhythm of the language. He picked a podcast hosted by a native English speaker from New York. At first, the accent felt fast to him, but that was part of the process. He started listening to 10 minutes every morning during breakfast. No distractions, no pressure. He didn't try to understand every word. He just let the voice become familiar. After the first week, he chose one episode and repeated it for 3 days in a row. He told me it felt strange at first, like he wasn't moving forward. But by the third day, something clicked. He didn't need to focus so hard on each sentence. He was beginning to understand the rhythm. The words didn't feel like noise anymore. They had shape and flow. After 2 weeks, Jonas added a new layer to his practice. He started shadowing. That means he would listen to one sentence, pause the audio, and repeat it out loud, trying to match the tone, the speed, even the breathing of the speaker. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about training his mouth and ears to work together. He said it felt like a workout, and some days it was frustrating. But he kept going, one step at a time. By the end of the first month, something had shifted. Jonas stopped translating in his head. The need to switch between English and German slowly faded away. He said, "I don't know how it happened, but now I hear the sentence and I just get it." That's the moment I love witnessing in learners. When they move from passive listening, just hearing sounds, to active understanding, where English becomes something they think in, not just something they study. Jonas didn't use special apps or expensive courses. He used one free podcast, one voice, and daily repetition. And that's why it worked. Because his brain had the chance to adjust. It stopped feeling overwhelmed by too many accents, too many expressions, or too much new input. Instead, it focused, slowly adapted, and grew stronger through regular contact with a familiar voice. I want to emphasize something important here. Jonas didn't understand everything in the beginning. He didn't pause to look up every word. He didn't force himself to memorize expressions. He simply showed up every day. He listened, he shadowed, and he allowed himself to be okay with not being perfect. That's where the real transformation happens. When you stop needing to master everything at once and start trusting the process of small, consistent steps. So if you're feeling stuck with your listening skills, I encourage you to try what Jonas did. Pick one podcast or YouTube channel. Choose a voice that feels clear to you, even if it's a little fast. Make it your daily companion. Listen to the same episodes more than once. Practice shadowing. Let yourself grow familiar with the rhythm and tone of that speaker. Your brain will begin to adjust. You'll start recognizing words and phrases more quickly. You'll stop translating so much. And eventually, you'll find yourself thinking in English without even realizing it. This kind of practice doesn't require a lot of time. Just 10 minutes a day is enough to start. The key is repetition. When you hear the same voice and the same patterns repeatedly, your brain builds strong connections. It learns to expect what's coming, to recognize intonation, to fill in meaning even when you miss a word. And that's what fluent listening really is. It's not about hearing perfectly, it's about understanding naturally. Jonas continued this habit for 2 months. By the end, he told me something that made me smile. He said, "Now, when I listen, it feels like I'm listening to a friend." That's how comfortable the voice had become. And more importantly, that's how comfortable he had become with the language. It was no longer something outside of him. It was part of his daily rhythm, part of his thinking, part of his voice. That's what I want for you. Not to study harder or learn faster, but to build a steady, reliable connection with English through daily listening. With one voice, one show, one step at a time. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to show up, listen, and let the language sink in slowly. Over time, it becomes something that lives inside you, not as something you translate, but as something you understand, feel, and speak with confidence. Sometimes the fastest way to improve your English listening is by slowing everything down. I know that might sound strange, especially when your goal is to understand native speakers who talk quickly, use contractions, and speak in a rhythm that often feels like a blur. But here's the truth. Trying to understand fast English before you've built a solid foundation is like trying to run before you've learned how to walk. And that's why slow listening is one of the most powerful tools you can use, especially if you often feel overwhelmed by the speed of native conversations. I've seen this work with so many learners. When they slow down their listening practice, literally reduce the playback speed of what they're hearing, they give their brain the time it needs to process the sounds, the rhythm, the structure of the language. They're no longer racing to keep up. They're training with intention, with clarity, and with focus. And that kind of listening doesn't just build comprehension, it builds confidence. Let me walk you through what slow listening actually looks like. Imagine you're listening to a podcast in English. The speaker is talking at a natural speed, and after a few seconds, you already feel lost. Maybe you understood the beginning, but then everything starts blending together. Your mind can't keep up, and your focus starts to slip. In that moment, instead of giving up or just listening without understanding, try this. Slow it down. Most audio and video platforms today let you reduce the speed to 0.9x or 0.75x. It's a small adjustment, but it can make a big difference. At that slower speed, suddenly the words don't crash into each other. You start to hear the spaces between them. You notice the intonation, the way the speaker's voice rises and falls. You hear individual sounds more clearly. It's not about making the speaker sound strange or robotic. It's about giving yourself space to catch up, to connect the dots, and to hear what's really being said. When you combine slow playback with repetition, you create a learning environment that's both supportive and effective. Instead of listening to a long episode all at once, choose a short clip, maybe 30 seconds or even just one sentence. Play it slowly. Listen once, then again, then one more time. Each time, ask yourself, what do I hear now that I didn't hear before? What word or phrase stands out more clearly? What's the emotion or meaning behind the tone? This kind of detailed listening builds the foundation that later allows you to understand faster speech without stress. I want to share something I do often with beginners. I pick a short dialogue and play it slowly, then have them shadow it. Shadowing is when you repeat the sentence out loud immediately after hearing it, trying to match the pronunciation, rhythm, and tone as closely as possible. At normal speed, this is really hard at first, but when we slow it down, something amazing happens. They start to hear how the words connect. They realize that what looked difficult on the page is actually just a natural sound pattern. And as they repeat it a few times, it starts to feel familiar. They're not just repeating sounds, they're understanding them from the inside. One of my students, Dario from Milan, used to get completely overwhelmed by fast English. He said it was like trying to listen to a race car zooming past. He could catch the color, maybe a number, but not the whole picture. I encouraged him to choose his favorite TV show in English and rewatch one short scene, but this time at 75% speed. He hesitated at first, thinking it would be too easy or boring. But after trying it for a week, he came back to me and said, "It's the first time I felt like I actually understand what they're saying." The slower speed gave him the confidence to break the sentence into smaller parts and really hear how people speak in everyday English. That's the real power of slow listening. It doesn't just help you understand, it helps you train. Just like athletes slow down their movements when they're learning a new skill, you can slow down English to focus on the mechanics. Where do the words connect? How do the sounds change when spoken naturally? What words are stressed and which ones are dropped? These are things that go unnoticed when the audio moves too quickly. But when you slow it down, they become clear. And once they're clear, they become part of how you listen. Another benefit of slow listening is that it helps reduce anxiety. So many learners feel pressure to keep up with native speakers. But what if you took that pressure away? What if, instead of trying to race through content, you gave yourself permission to pause, to go back, to take your time? That kind of mindset shift can change everything. Suddenly, listening becomes less about proving yourself and more about exploring the language. And the more relaxed you are, the more your brain is able to absorb. This is also a great way to work on pronunciation. When you hear a sentence slowly and you repeat it out loud, you start to notice where your pronunciation feels different from the speaker's. You might realize that you're stressing the wrong syllable, or that a sound you thought you were saying correctly actually needs a small adjustment. These small corrections build up over time, and they lead to more natural, confident speaking. That's why slow listening and shadowing go so well together. One helps your ears, the other helps your mouth. And together they help you think in English, not just understand it. If you're wondering how to start this today, it's simple. Pick a piece of content you already enjoy. Maybe it's a YouTube video, a podcast episode, or a clip from a movie. Choose a section. Just 1 minute is enough, and slow it down to 75%. Listen to it 3 times. Each time, write down the main words you hear. Then try shadowing one sentence. Speak it slowly, then a little faster. Pay attention to how the sounds feel in your mouth. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware. That awareness becomes understanding, and that understanding becomes fluency. Remember, slowing down is not a weakness. It's a strategy. It's how we build the foundation that allows us to go faster later. It's how we give our brain the tools it needs to make English feel natural. You're not falling behind when you slow down. You're building strength, clarity, and trust in your own process. And that trust is what carries you forward. So don't be afraid to take your time. One slow, focused minute of listening today could be worth more than 20 rushed minutes tomorrow. Give yourself that gift and let the learning unfold at your own pace. Shadowing is a powerful technique that I love to share with my listeners because it bridges the gap between listening and speaking in a way that feels natural and effective. When you shadow, you basically repeat what you hear either at the same time as the speaker or immediately after. It might feel a little strange or awkward at first, but it's not about being perfect with your pronunciation or getting every word exactly right. Instead, shadowing is about training your brain and mouth to work together, to connect the sounds you hear with the words you say, and to build that automatic flow of English. Let me tell you about Maya, a learner from Istanbul who shared her experience with me. Maya used to struggle with understanding English in everyday conversations. She would listen carefully, but her brain kept trying to translate everything back into Turkish before she could respond. This made speaking slow and tiring, and sometimes she lost confidence. Then she discovered shadowing, and it changed everything. Maya started small. She would take short audio clips or podcast sentences and listen while walking in the park. As she walked, she repeated the sentences right after hearing them, trying to match the speaker's rhythm and intonation. At first, she was a little self-conscious about talking to herself outdoors, but she soon realized that this was her time to practice freely and confidently. What happened next was remarkable. After a few weeks of daily shadowing, Maya noticed that her brain began to think in English. She stopped pausing to translate in her head. The words and phrases came more naturally. When she spoke in casual conversations with friends or colleagues, she didn't have to mentally build her sentences piece by piece anymore. Instead, the language flowed through her. She described the experience as feeling like her brain and mouth were finally in sync, as if English was no longer a foreign language, but a familiar voice she could speak along with. The beauty of shadowing is that it trains you to listen and speak simultaneously, which is how real-life conversations work. When someone speaks to you, you don't wait until they finish before starting to think about how to respond. Your brain is already preparing your reply while you listen. Shadowing simulates this process, helping you get used to the speed and rhythm of English as it is naturally spoken. I want to be clear that shadowing isn't about sounding perfect or mimicking an accent exactly. It's about practice and connection. Your goal is to imitate the flow, the melody, and the patterns of speech. This trains your ears to recognize sounds more easily and your mouth to produce those sounds more naturally. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where your listening improves because your speaking practice helps your brain anticipate sounds and phrases. One simple way to start shadowing is to find a short sentence or phrase that you like. It can come from a podcast, a movie, or even a song. Listen closely, then try to repeat it immediately after you hear it. Don't worry if you don't get every word perfect. Focus on matching the rhythm and intonation. As you get more comfortable, try shadowing entire sentences or short paragraphs without stopping. The goal is to keep your voice moving as closely as possible to the speaker's voice. Another helpful tip is to use content that you enjoy and are interested in. When you care about the topic, it's easier to stay motivated and engaged. Plus, hearing words and phrases you already know or want to learn helps your brain make connections faster. For Maya, she chose podcasts about photography because it was her passion. This made her shadowing practice feel less like a chore and more like a conversation with a friend. You might wonder how shadowing helps with thinking in English. When you repeat what you hear right away, your brain doesn't have time to translate back and forth between your native language and English. Instead, it learns to process the meaning directly in English. This builds fluency because you start responding to the sounds and patterns themselves, rather than to the translation. This is exactly what native speakers do. They don't translate in their heads. They just understand and respond naturally. Shadowing also strengthens your pronunciation and intonation without the pressure of formal study. When you copy the way a native speaker stresses certain words or uses rising and falling tones, your English sounds more natural and easier to understand. This makes conversations smoother and less tiring because you're using the rhythm of English instead of speaking word by word. If you're new to shadowing, start small and be patient with yourself. Even a few minutes a day can make a difference. You might feel awkward at first, and that's okay. The important thing is to keep practicing regularly. As you get used to this technique, you'll notice your listening becomes sharper and your speaking more fluent. Your brain will stop relying on translation and start thinking in English, just like Maya experienced. So, if you want to try shadowing today, here's a simple exercise. Pick a short clip of English audio, maybe a sentence from a podcast or a line from a movie. Listen once or twice to understand the meaning, then play it again and repeat the words immediately after the speaker. Focus on copying the sound and rhythm. Do this several times until you feel comfortable, then move on to the next sentence. With time and consistency, you'll find yourself connecting more deeply with English, hearing it, and speaking it with greater ease. Shadowing might feel challenging at first, but it's one of the most effective ways to build that natural connection between listening and speaking. It turns passive listening into active practice, and it trains your brain to process English quickly and fluently. Just like Maya, you can start thinking in English and enjoy the feeling of speaking with confidence. Remember, this is not about perfection. It's about progress and connection. So why not give shadowing a try? Speak with the speaker and watch your English come alive. 1C. Of the biggest challenges English learners face is the urge to look up every word they don't understand. I get it. When you see a word you don't know, it feels natural to reach for a dictionary or an app and find the exact meaning. But I want to share something important with you today. Sometimes the fastest way to grow your listening skills is to stop doing that. Instead of translating or checking every word, start trusting the context. Let the meaning come to you naturally from the situation, the tone, and the way the language is used. This shift in mindset can transform the way you learn English. I remember when I first started learning English. I was that person who had a notebook full of new words, always pausing videos or conversations to write something down or search for the meaning. At first, it felt like the only way to really understand. But over time, I realized something crucial. Understanding every single word was slowing me down. I was interrupting the flow of listening, breaking the connection with the speaker, and missing the bigger picture. It was like trying to read a puzzle piece by piece without seeing the whole image. What I needed was to step back and look at the puzzle as a whole. The truth is, language is much more than words. It's about meaning, emotion, and communication. When we listen, our brains don't always need the exact definition of each word to understand what's happening. We pick up clues from the speaker's tone, the context of the conversation, and even body language if it's a video. These clues help us infer meaning, fill in the gaps, and build a bigger understanding. Our brains are amazing pattern machines, constantly searching for connections and familiar structures. When you trust your brain to do this, you learn faster and more naturally. Let me give you a simple challenge that you can try today. Spend one full day listening to English without stopping to translate or check the dictionary. It could be a podcast, a YouTube video, an audiobook, or even a conversation. Your only goal is to focus on the overall meaning, the feeling, and the flow. Let yourself guess what's happening instead of needing to know every word. At first, this might feel uncomfortable or even frustrating because it goes against how we've been taught to learn languages. But give yourself permission to feel that discomfort. It's part of the learning process. During this challenge, pay close attention to the tone of voice. Is the speaker excited, sad, or joking? Tone is a powerful tool that tells you how to interpret the words. If you watch a video, notice the speaker's facial expressions and gestures. These nonverbal signals give you information that the words alone can't. Even if you don't understand a particular word, The way someone smiles or raises their eyebrows can clue you into what they mean. This holistic way of listening and watching is how native speakers understand each other effortlessly. Another important factor is repeated exposure. The more you listen to English in context, the more familiar the words and phrases become, even if you don't know their exact dictionary meanings. Your brain starts recognizing patterns and common expressions. For example, you might hear the phrase, "That's a piece of cake," several times. Even if you don't look it up, you begin to understand from context that it means something is easy. Over time, these repeated exposures build your vocabulary naturally without memorization. Or flashcards. I want to share a story about a student I worked with named Tomas, who lives in Warsaw. Tomas was very focused on translating every word, and it was causing him a lot of frustration. He told me he would stop videos repeatedly to look up words, and then he would forget the beginning of the sentence by the time he finished. I challenged him to try something new. Spend a day listening without looking anything up. At first, he felt anxious and lost. But by the end of the day, Tomas realized he had understood much more than he thought possible. He was using the context, the way people spoke, the subjects they talked about, and the tone to guess meanings. This simple change helped him feel more confident and relaxed when listening to English. When you rely too much on dictionaries, you risk turning English into a list of isolated words instead of a living, connected language. The beauty of learning from context is that it trains your brain to think in English, not in your native language. You start to associate meaning directly with English words and sounds, rather than always translating back and forth. This makes listening smoother and speaking more natural, because your brain doesn't have to work as hard. Of course, I'm not saying you should never use a dictionary. There are times when looking up a word is helpful, especially if it's a key word that changes the meaning of a sentence, or if it's important for your goals. But most of the time, especially during listening practice, it's better to hold off and see what your brain can do on its own. Give it the chance to fill in the blanks and connect the dots. This active process is what builds your skills and confidence. I also encourage you to think about the language you already know and use it as a foundation. Sometimes when you hear a new word or phrase, you can guess its meaning by comparing it with what you already understand. You might recognize part of the word, or the way it's used in the I sentence can remind you of a similar phrase. This is another example of how context helps your brain learn naturally. The more you practice learning from context instead of a dictionary, the more you'll notice your listening skills improve. You'll become faster at understanding because you're not stuck translating. You'll catch the meaning even when you miss some words. You'll feel more comfortable in real conversations where people speak quickly or use slang and expressions you haven't seen in a textbook. You'll start to think in English because you'll be absorbing meaning directly from the language. So today, I challenge you to try something different. Choose your favorite English audio or video and listen for meaning without looking up every word. Pay attention to the speaker's tone and the situation. Notice any gestures or facial expressions if you can. Let your brain do what it does best. Find patterns and make connections. Trust yourself to understand more than you think. This simple mindset shift can open up a whole new way of learning English and help you move closer to fluency. When it comes to improving your English listening skills, one of the most important things I want to share with you is this. Don't limit yourself to textbook audio. Yes, textbooks and language courses can be helpful for building a foundation, but if you want to truly master listening, you need to hear real people speaking in real situations. That means podcasts, interviews, YouTube vlogs, and any content where people talk naturally, with their pauses, fillers, hesitations, and even mistakes. These authentic voices show you how English really sounds outside of a classroom, and they help you build the kind of understanding you need for everyday life. I know it can feel intimidating at first to listen to real English speakers. They don't always speak clearly or slowly. They might use slang, interrupt themselves, or change topics quickly. But this is exactly why listening to real voices is so valuable. It trains your brain to handle the unpredictability of natural conversation. When you listen to scripted textbook audio, everything is clean, slow, and perfect. But real life isn't like that. Real conversations have rhythm. They have emotions. They have connection. And when you listen to those authentic voices, you're training your ears to pick up on those details. Let me tell you about Helena, a learner from Warsaw, who shared her story with me. Helena was used to studying English with traditional courses and exercises. She could understand textbook dialogues well, but found it very hard to follow real conversations or interviews. She said real English felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. People talked too fast or used words she hadn't learned yet. I suggested she try something different. Every morning while making coffee, she would watch travel vlogs in English on YouTube. These were videos where travelers shared their experiences, explored new cities, and talked casually with the camera. At first, Helena admitted she didn't understand everything. The accents varied, and sometimes the speakers used expressions that were new to her. But because she watched these vlogs daily, the voices became familiar. She started noticing patterns in the way people spoke. She heard common fillers like, you know, actually, and I mean, and she realized these phrases helped give speakers time to think, not to confuse her. Gradually, she stopped feeling overwhelmed by the unpredictability of real English and began to enjoy the variety and energy of authentic conversations. One of the beautiful things about listening to real people is that you experience the language as a living, breathing thing. You hear the natural rhythm, the rise and fall of the voice, the quick pauses, and the speed changes. You notice how people emphasize certain words to show excitement or emotion. You catch the way a question sounds different from a statement, not just in words, but in tone. All of these little details help you understand meaning beyond just the vocabulary. Helena also found that listening to real people helped her connect emotionally with the language. Because the speakers were sharing their lives, their stories, and their personalities, Helena felt like she was part of a community. This connection made her more motivated to keep listening and practicing. She started imagining herself in those conversations, thinking about what she would say if she were there. This kind of emotional engagement is key to moving from passive listening to active understanding. When you listen only to textbook audio, you miss out on this human connection. You hear the language, but you don't feel it. Real voices bring warmth, humor, hesitation, and spontaneity. These are the things that make language real and memorable. They also help you prepare for real conversations, where people don't follow scripts and where unexpected topics or expressions come up. If you want to try listening to real people today, start by finding content that interests you. It could be a podcast about your favorite hobby, interviews with experts, or daily vlogs from people who share their lives in English. Choose topics you enjoy because that keeps you engaged and curious. Watch or listen regularly, even if you don't understand every word. Over time, your brain will pick up the patterns and rhythms naturally. You might notice at first that real voices feel chaotic or confusing. That's normal. Real conversations are messy, but this messiness is exactly what trains your brain to be flexible and quick. Instead of freezing when you don't understand something, you learn to keep listening and use other clues, tone, context, facial expressions if it's video, to fill in the gaps. This skill is essential for real-life fluency. I also encourage you to embrace the imperfections in real speech. People make mistakes, repeat themselves, and sometimes get off track. When you listen to these moments, you realize that fluency isn't about speaking perfectly, it's about communicating effectively and naturally. Real voices teach you this lesson better than any textbook ever can. Helena's daily habit of watching travel vlogs became a powerful tool for her listening improvement. She didn't need to spend hours studying grammar or memorizing vocabulary lists. She simply immersed herself in the natural flow of English, surrounded by real voices and real stories. This immersion helped her brain adapt, helped her feel connected, and helped her gain confidence in understanding everyday English. So, if you want to build strong listening skills, I invite you to go beyond textbooks. Seek out authentic English voices and listen to how people really speak. Allow yourself to hear the pauses, the fillers, and even the mistakes. Let the rhythm and emotion of real conversation guide your understanding. This kind of listening builds real connection, not just with the language, but with the people who speak it every day. One of the most common questions I get from learners is, Julia, how can I fit English practice into my busy life? And honestly, that's a question we all face. We have work, family, chores, and so many other responsibilities. It can feel like there's no extra time for language learning. But here's the good news. You don't need to carve out special hours or create complicated study plans to improve your listening skills. What you really need is a simple, Shift in your daily habits. You can practice English during the routines you already have, and even 10 minutes a day adds up to meaningful progress. Let me explain what I mean by practicing during daily routines. Think about activities you do regularly: cooking dinner, commuting to work or school, walking the dog, exercising, cleaning the house, or even waiting in line. These moments might seem small or unimportant, but they are perfect opportunities to immerse yourself in English without adding pressure or stress. Instead of just letting your mind wander, try to engage with English sounds during these times. You don't have to understand every word or write down notes. The goal is to let your brain get used to the rhythm, melody, and flow of the language. For example, imagine you're cooking dinner. While chopping vegetables or stirring a pot, you can listen to a podcast or an audiobook in English. You don't need to focus every second on the words. Instead, allow the sounds to fill the background and gently pull your attention. Your brain will naturally start to recognize familiar phrases, intonation patterns, and common expressions. Even if you miss some details, the exposure helps build your listening muscles. I want to share a story about Lucas, who lives in Amsterdam. He told me that before changing his routine, he struggled to find time for English practice. Then he realized that his daily commute by bike was the perfect moment to listen. Every day he put on an English podcast about technology and cycling. At first, he didn't understand everything, but over weeks of consistent listening during his rides, he noticed his comprehension improving. He felt more confident hearing fast conversations and could even join in on discussions with his English-speaking colleagues. The key was using a regular activity, something he already did, and adding English to it. Commuting isn't the only opportunity. Exercise is another fantastic time to listen. Whether you're jogging, doing yoga, or working out at the gym, you can play English content through your headphones. This turns your workout into a double benefit. You're improving your health and your language skills at the same time. I've seen learners tell me that repeating simple sentences they hear while exercising helps their pronunciation and confidence. The movement and rhythm of their bodies sync with the language rhythm, making the experience even more effective. Cleaning the house or doing chores might not sound exciting, but they're perfect for passive listening. You don't need to stop what you're doing to focus hard on the language. Just let the sounds come in as you move around. Your brain processes more than you think when you listen repeatedly, even if you're not actively trying to understand every word. If you spend time waiting in lines, in traffic, or during short breaks at work, those moments can become mini English sessions. Instead of scrolling on your phone, try listening to a few minutes of an English podcast or watching a quick video. These small doses of English add up and help maintain your connection to the language every day. I encourage you to choose one daily activity where you can consistently listen to English. It could be your morning coffee time, your commute, your evening walk, or even brushing your teeth. Make it a habit to play English audio during that time. At first, you might feel like you're not learning much, but don't underestimate the power of regular, consistent exposure. Your brain is listening and learning even when you're not focused on every word. It's like building a muscle. You start small and gradually get stronger. Another important tip is to let your mind engage with the sounds, not the words. Don't pressure yourself to translate or understand everything perfectly. Instead, listen for the melody of the language, the ups and downs, the rhythm, the speed. Over time, this will help you start thinking in English rather than translating from your native language. This shift is essential for fluency. Practicing during daily routines also reduces stress around learning. It turns English from a separate, difficult task into a natural part of your life. When you integrate listening into what you already do, it becomes easier to stay motivated and enjoy the process. You'll notice that English starts to feel less like a foreign language and more like a familiar friend. So today, I invite you to look at your daily schedule and find one moment where you can add English listening. It doesn't have to be long, just 10 minutes is enough to start. Choose content you like, maybe a podcast episode, a short story, or an interesting vlog. Play it during that activity and simply enjoy hearing English as part of your routine. Remember, learning English is not about finding extra time. It's about making small changes that fit your life. Consistency and habit are what create lasting improvement. By practicing during your daily routines, you build a steady connection to the language that will grow stronger every day. You're not just studying English, you're living it. One of the most powerful shifts you can experience as an English learner is when you start thinking in English while you listen. This change might seem small, but it completely transforms how you understand and respond to the language. When your mind switches from translating every word to processing meaning directly in English, your responses become faster, more natural, and more confident. This is a major milestone on the journey from learner to fluent user. I want to explain why thinking in English builds confidence and how it changes your entire mindset. At first, many learners see themselves as students who need to analyze and decode the language. They might feel anxious about making mistakes or worry about getting everything right. This student mindset creates hesitation and slows down your ability to respond naturally. But when you train yourself to think in English during listening, you start to feel like a user of the language, someone who can communicate, share ideas, and participate fully without the constant filter of translation. Thinking in English means you don't have to pause and rebuild sentences in your head before you speak or respond. Instead, your brain understands the message directly and prepares your reply almost instantly. This flow feels much closer to how native speakers communicate. It's not perfect, and you will still make mistakes. That's part of learning. But your ability to speak spontaneously improves dramatically. Let me share a story about Tomas, a professional from Prague who faced this exact challenge. Tomas often attended meetings at work where everyone spoke English. He was very knowledgeable in his field but felt nervous when it was his turn to speak. His hesitation was caused by trying to translate questions and answers in his head, which slowed him down and made him second-guess himself. Tomas wanted to be more confident and participate actively, but it felt like a wall he couldn't break through. We worked together on a simple but powerful practice. Tomas began creating an internal dialogue in English while he listened. Instead of focusing on translating every sentence, he started asking himself simple questions in English as the conversation unfolded. He might think, "What is this person really asking?" Or, "How would I answer this?" He used short phrases to prepare responses silently. This practice wasn't about perfection. It was about training his brain to stay in English throughout the listening process. At first, Tomas found this exercise challenging. It required mental effort and concentration. But he was consistent. After a few weeks, he noticed a clear change. During meetings, he didn't feel as anxious. His mind was already prepared to respond, and his hesitation disappeared. Tomas began to contribute ideas more freely and felt proud of how naturally the conversation flowed. The internal dialogue practice helped him shift from feeling like a student to feeling like a confident user of English. This shift in mindset is crucial. When you think in English, you are no longer relying on translation, which often creates a bottleneck. Instead, you process meaning directly and can respond immediately. This faster mental processing builds your self-assurance because you feel capable of handling real-life conversations. You stop worrying about making mistakes and focus on communicating your ideas clearly. Another reason thinking in English builds confidence is because it changes your relationship with the language. Instead of seeing English as something distant or difficult, you begin to experience it as a tool for expressing yourself. This change reduces fear and increases your willingness to speak and listen actively. You start to enjoy the process of communication rather than dreading it. If you want to practice thinking in English, I suggest a few simple techniques. While you listen to English content, whether it's a podcast, a video, or a conversation, try to create an internal dialogue. Ask yourself questions about what you hear. Think about how you would respond. Use short, easy phrases that help you stay in English. For example, if you hear someone talking about their weekend, you might think, "What did I do last weekend?" Or, "How would I describe my favorite hobby?" These questions keep your mind active and connected to the language. You can also practice this during your daily routines. When you listen to English while cooking or walking, try to summarize what you heard in your own words silently, or imagine you are telling a friend about the same topic in English. This kind of mental rehearsal helps your brain get used to thinking in English naturally. Remember, this process takes time and patience. Thinking in English won't happen overnight, but every moment you spend practicing internal dialogue brings you closer to fluency. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more confident you will feel in conversations. So, if you want to boost your English confidence, focus on training your brain to think in English during listening. This simple shift transforms you from a hesitant learner into a confident user. Like Tomas, you'll find yourself speaking more naturally, responding more quickly, and enjoying conversations more. Thinking in English is the key that unlocks your full potential in the I. Language. Before we finish today's episode, I want to gently invite you to take just one practice we talked about and try it in your very next English listening session. It doesn't need to be anything big or complicated, just one simple step. Maybe it's shadowing a few sentences, or focusing on the meaning instead of chasing every word, or allowing yourself to listen without translating or using a dictionary. The important part is to pick something that feels manageable for you and to practice it with curiosity and kindness toward yourself. Fluency is not a race or a destination you reach overnight. It's more like a journey where every small, consistent step counts. When you listen with curiosity and without pressure, you let your brain absorb English naturally. You create connections and build confidence bit by bit. Remember, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to miss words. And it's okay to feel unsure sometimes. These moments are part of your growth. Real progress happens when you listen regularly with patience and openness. I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Your dedication to improving your English means a lot, and I'm honored to be part of your learning journey. If you found today's episode helpful, please consider following this podcast so you don't miss future episodes that will guide you gently but powerfully toward fluency. And if you liked what you heard, leaving a like or a comment helps us reach more learners like you all over the world. Keep practicing with kindness. Remember, every time you listen, you're moving closer to thinking and speaking in English naturally. I look forward to hearing about your progress and sharing more tips with you soon. Until next time, take care and keep enjoying your English learning adventure.